You're listening to the Speaking Tongues podcast. I'm your host, El Charisse. Each week, I sit down to a conversation with multilinguals where we discuss and celebrate language, life, and culture through our own perspectives. Episode 126, Speaking Welsh. Hello, language lovers. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Speaking Tongues, the podcast in conversation with multilinguals. It's no secret that I've been wanting to feature the Welsh language on this show for years, so I'm thrilled to have this conversation with Dafydd, host of the Life to the Full podcast, about the Welsh language and culture in Wales. You'll definitely want to stay tuned throughout as we learn a lot of Welsh vocabulary and pronunciation this week. In this episode, Dafydd tells us about growing up speaking Welsh and English and attending school where Welsh was the language of instruction. He breaks down the Welsh language and how to understand and use the grammar, and he even lets us know the one linguistic feature of Welsh that he loves. Now, since Wales is a bilingual country, we learn about where we hear the language spoken and where we'll see it while out and about. We take a pointed look at Welsh poetry, including examples of the Cynghannedd rhyming pattern, and Dafydd tells us about Welsh rugby, the longest place name in Europe, and about life in Cardiff. Massive thank you to Dafydd for this conversation and for talking with us about your language and culture. If you enjoy episodes of Speaking Tongues, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Speaking Tongues podcast on Apple Podcasts, and like and subscribe on YouTube so that other language lovers like ourselves can find the show. And if you've been a long-time listener of the show or even a recent listener, you can now pledge ongoing support for the show on buymeacoffee.com or on patreon.com. Special shout out to Speaking Tongues' recent supporters and patrons Heidi L, Linnea H, Pat N, and Yari A. For just $5 a month, you'll have access to excerpts from this conversation that did not make it to the full published episode. And as you know, I wrote a book. My food zine of international language and cuisine, Taste Buds Volume 1, is available now for purchase. Check social media for the sneak peek inside the book and make sure that you buy one for yourself and one for your friends. Links to all platforms are in the show notes. Okay, let's chat. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I am here today with Dafydd. How are you today, Dafydd?
I am excellent. Thank you very much, Elle. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited to finally have a conversation about the Welsh language and Welsh culture and as many Welsh things as we can get into this conversation today. This has been a long time coming, so thank you so much for joining and having this conversation with me. I like to start each episode with the same question, and that is, what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
So I grew up bilingually. I grew up speaking Welsh and English. My dad only spoke Welsh to me when I was a child, and my mum only spoke English to me. My mum couldn't speak Welsh when I was a child, and when me and my brother were teenagers, about 14, 13, something like that, my mum decided, hey, I'm fed up of not knowing what's going on in the family with you three talking Welsh all the time, so she learnt as well later in life. So that's what I grew up speaking. And I have learnt French to a reasonable degree. I studied French at school, I did A-level, and when I went to university, I would seek out French speakers to kind of chat with, talk to, and I've just kind of kept it up over the years. I love listening to French podcasts and watching French YouTube and reading French books and that kind of stuff just to keep it going. And I have also dabbled with a little bit of Spanish and Italian. I had an experience when I went to Italy when I was about 19 years old, and I did not speak any Italian at all. I picked up one word when I was there, fragole, strawberries.
Mm-hmm.
I could
It's a
also
good
say
one.
Roberto Baggio, who's a famous footballer from the
Yeah.
90s.
Oh gosh.
And that was it. And I felt
Mm-hmm.
so bad. I felt like so awful that I'd gone to this place and I hadn't made any effort to learn anything. And
Mm-hmm.
so from then on, I made a deal with myself. If I was going to go somewhere, I was going to learn at least the basics of saying, hello, please and thank you, and how are you, that kind of thing, just to show willing and to connect with people. And so that's why I learnt Spanish and Italian. I learnt Spanish for a little while, and yeah, just to go on holiday. And I
Mm-hmm.
learnt Italian also for 7 months for the purposes of going on holiday. And then,
Nice.
yeah, I kind of like to keep them all going as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm certainly nowhere near the level that I am in French in the other two.
Yeah.
So.
I think that is a really great attitude to have, to want to learn a language and, be able to express the pleasantries and the things that you need to get by and not just rely on, English or, hoping that someone can translate for you in the while you're away. So you grew up in Wales, and what kind of second language opportunities were there outside, well, in school? Were you was there like Welsh class in school, Welsh language class, or were there other offerings, language offerings in school growing up?
So my education was entirely in Welsh. So I went to Welsh language school where everybody spoke Welsh and everything was taught in Welsh. In primary school, I went to secondary school and everything was taught in Welsh. And so I didn't even study any English until
Mm,
I was, 7 or 8 years old.
okay.
Um, but that is not necessarily the norm.
Hmm.
There are Welsh language schools around, and there are English language schools around. And in the English language schools, the provision of Welsh is variable, shall we say. It is supposed to be a requirement from the Welsh government that Welsh is taught in schools, all schools.
Hmm.
But I know that is not well done in some places and much better in other places.
I
And
see.
then, yeah. So when you get to secondary school, there is often a provision of a French language. So, age 11, I started learning French,
Hmm.
and I could have studied German. I worked at a school for a number of years as a maths teacher, and they offered Spanish, you know, all sorts of different second languages, but mainly, the big European ones.
Mm. Is that the choice of the parent whether to send their child to a Welsh language school or an English language school?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. It is. And interestingly, so I worked in a Welsh medium secondary school, and
Hmm.
probably about barely 5% of our students came from homes where both parents spoke Welsh. About probably maybe 65, 70% of our students came from homes where there was no Welsh at home, but the parents have opted to send their children to Welsh language primary school and then through to secondary school
Hmm.
because of the opportunities that it affords them, you
Yeah.
know, to learn a second language. So my daughter now is 7 years old, and again her friends, her peers, are from English speaking homes and they are learning Welsh,
Hmm.
and it's a great opportunity for them. And also, interestingly, the two of the Welsh secondary schools are always the kind of top two or three schools in the area. So the
Hmm.
Welsh language education is often, they get better results. And so
Nice.
you get aspirational parents sending their kids to Welsh school because they want their kids to do better at school.
Yeah. Wow. This is interesting. And the first thing I'm thinking, that I don't expect you to have an answer, but like, if you're a child and Welsh is not spoken in the home, and then you're going to Welsh school, so all your instruction is in Welsh. I wonder what that's like for those kids. Like,
Yeah, it is fascinating. I mean,
yeah.
they're 4 years old. They're 3 years old, 3 and 4 years old when they start,
Hmm.
and it's just completely natural to them. So they start with very basic things like sit down and you know this is the whiteboard, this is a pen, all that kind of stuff, and they just absorb it. It really is incredible to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's like watching a child learn a language for the first time when they're tiny,
Hmm.
but it's just that they're a few years older.
Yeah.
I remember going to the Basque country for a school trip, and
Hmm.
the the kids would learn English. So the kids are already bilingual by the time they get to school because they speak Basque and Spanish. And then when they get to school, they start learning English, aged 3 or 4 or wherever it is. And the English teachers would pretend that they couldn't speak Spanish and they couldn't
Mm.
speak Basque and they only spoke English to them. And these kids are just learning their third language. They just pick it up, and so you know almost all of them are kind of trilingual by the time
Yeah.
they get to 10 years old or 11 years old.
Yeah. Oh, to have my 10-year-old brain back, that would be, I could get
Yeah,
so much done.
yeah. And to have the patience that other adults afford you when you're a child. So,
Definitely, definitely.
you
No
don't quite
excuses
get that
now.
level of patience when you're a learner speaking to
No,
someone.
definitely not. Okay, so when I was researching for this conversation and I kept coming across another name. So I'm saying Welsh, like the Welsh language and Welsh, culture and people. But I kept seeing another name and I don't know how to say it, but it's the Welsh name in Welsh. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. It is
Okay.
Cymraeg
Cymraeg,
or Cymraeg.
Cymraeg,
Yeah, well,
Cymraeg or Cymraeg. Okay.
I do teach Welsh a little bit on and off, and one of the things that some of my students get hung up on is this dialect, the kind of the different pronunciations of words, and so Cymraeg and Cymraeg are both perfectly acceptable ways of saying it, and it
Hmm.
just depends on where you are in Wales.
Ah,
And there's quite a variation in accents across South Wales, and there's a particularly big difference in accents between the north and the south as well.
oh my
So
goodness. Ah, so since we're talking about Cymraeg, can can
yeah,
I say that? Is that
yeah,
like
absolutely
okay,
great.
okay. Since we're
Yeah.
talking about Cymraeg, tell us about the language. How do we form sentences? How do we is it gendered? Is it agglutinative? Is it tonal? What are some of the interesting things about the language that, things that stand out and, maybe even things that you love about the language?
Yeah, so it is gendered. So to answer some of your questions, we do have masculine and feminine, although people don't really care as much about it as they do in some other languages like French.
French.
Yeah. So if you were to say le fenêtre, they might look at you and say, oh, well, what kind of learner is this? Obviously doesn't know anything.
Hmm.
But we really don't care too much about it in Welsh. It does sometimes kind of I mean change the sentence structure, but you can usually tell from the context what people actually mean,
Hmm.
even if they've got the wrong gender for something or other. It is a VSO language.
Okay.
So verb, subject, object. So a sentence example might be gwelais I y ferch. So gwelais is saw, is me, and y ferch is the girl. So
Okay.
saw me the girl means I saw the girl.
Right.
But that is, I think it's changing
Mm.
because formal Welsh can be quite formal when you write it, but then when you speak it, it can be quite informal, and you can, see quite a big difference between written Welsh and spoken Welsh.
Mm.
And so spoken Welsh now is changing a little bit, and it's becoming more sort of subject, verb, object. So nes I weld y ferch. So me saw the girl. And I don't know where that comes from, where that change is, happening, but it's something that seems to be going on. But one of my favorite things about the Welsh language is the mutations that change the beginning of the word. So, for example, there's three types of mutations there, and the mutation is called treiglad. So you've got treiglad meddal, which means a soft mutation. Treiglad llais, which is an aspirate mutation.
Okay.
And treiglad trwynol, which is a nasal mutation.
Okay.
So if you take the word pale, for example, which means ball, if you just say pale, it means a ball. If you say fy mhel, that means my ball. And if you say ei bale, that means his ball. And if you say ei ffeil, it means her ball. So it changes, and there are a whole load of rules about mutations. And the really interesting thing is that probably the people that can do it properly don't know why they're doing it properly. They don't know the rules. And then people that don't know, or that want to learn the rules and try and do it properly, get so bogged down with the rules that they never get to where they want to be. And also the reality is that most people won't care if you mutate. So I think the Welsh people are very generous overall and forgiving with their level of language quality. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But, yeah.
That's so interesting. Like the word completely changes, like depending on that mutation in the front.
Yeah,
Like,
so it's the front of the word that changes.
yeah.
So you've got 9 letters that change, and they can change in 3 different ways.
Yeah.
So
Wow. That's amazing. That's a fun fact.
that is a fun
Definitely,
fact.
definitely for me, because I would not have known. I've seen Welsh written and I have heard Welsh spoken, and my brain has not been able to connect the two. As you see, I'm holding a pencil because I feel like I'm going to start taking notes in this episode. But this is so cool. I think this is amazing. I was going to ask you about how the spoken Welsh is changing. Do you think that it has anything to do with the fact that English is also spoken in Wales, and maybe just a more, people using more of like the internet and social media and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I was saying earlier about the Welsh learning in school, a lot of the Welsh learning that happens in school is kids trying their best to speak Welsh, and they end up translating in their heads from English into Welsh when they want to say something, and what they come out with isn't necessarily grammatically correct. But the more and more you have generations of kids coming through the system that speak this way, obviously the more it kind of perforates society, and the more accepted it becomes, and it's almost like it's become a new acceptable way of saying things. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting what not only bilingual community does, but how language changes and how it changes so quickly when we are so connected through a digital medium. So I'm both scared and excited to see how, the next generation is passing the baton with language and what they're going to do with it.
Mm.
And I'm already feeling like I'm at the age where I'm like Googling slang words that I see because it's just not part of my vernacular. And I'm like, wait, is this a bad thing? Is this a good thing? And it's just like, wow, things just changed so much from the 90s when
Yeah, yeah.
when these things came automatically. Um, was there ever a time in Wales where there was not much emphasis put on speaking the Welsh language, or has it always been a very powerful, very, you know, big language that people were proud of? Or was there ever a time where like people wanted more English dominance than Welsh dominance? And there was like I don't want to get into like politics because I really don't understand it, but maybe like an identity back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thinking about Welsh culture and, how you kind of inherit a culture as a person that is born into this group of people, you kind of inherit some of their beliefs and some of their ways of thinking that you don't even realize are different from, other people. And one of the things I think about the Welsh in general is that they still, I don't think it's an inferiority, but they still feel like, not that they're still under the English rule or anything like that, but that kind of influence of having been ruled over by England for so long is definitely still there. And yes, certainly, I think it was King Henry VIII that passed a law which meant that Welsh was no longer allowed to be an official language of the country. And so everything had to be in English officially. And so that kind of permeated throughout the centuries, and so that education for many years was kind of an English thing.
Mm.
And my dad went to an English school because there was no Welsh school available, and English was seen as the language of the future. English was seen as the language of the educated class. If you wanted to get on in life, you needed to have your education in English. And so Welsh was certainly very much not promoted for a long time. And I don't know if you've heard, or maybe some of your listeners have heard about the Welsh not. And so children that spoke Welsh at school would have this big wooden thing hung around their neck saying Welsh not. And whoever was the last person wearing the Welsh not at the end of the day would be caned
Oh
for
my
speaking
God.
Welsh. Yes, I mean, fortunately that doesn't happen now, but yeah,
Yeah.
that was certainly a thing. Probably, the end of the 1800s into the early 1900s.
That's horrible.
Children were caned for speaking Welsh. But yeah, it's certainly the case that in the last, well, I guess 25, 30 years or so, that the Welsh government have really started to push Welsh medium education as a way of reaching their target of 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. And yes, come on. And yeah, I mean, there's always been a concern amongst the Welsh people that English would come and dominate, and that
Mm.
Welsh would be stamped out. And we're talking going back here. We've got time to go into the story of the Welsh settlers that went to Patagonia in 1865.
I've heard that.
Yeah, so this group of Welsh farmers mostly were so concerned about the state of the Welsh language, even back in 1865, that they were willing to pack up everything and get on a boat and sail to Patagonia and set up their own Welsh community there, and where they could be free to speak Welsh and not have the influence of the English over them. And I mean, it's fascinating that Welsh community is still still there, and so you still have Welsh speakers in Patagonia who have traditional Welsh things like Eisteddfod, which we'll touch on a bit later, I guess. But there's that feeling of worrying about the English coming to dominate our language, and there's essays and radio broadcasts from the mid 1900s saying the state of the Welsh language is not good. It's going to die out unless we do something about it. So it feels like there's a constant battle, and it feels like now the government are actually trying to do something to increase the number of Welsh speakers.
Yeah, that's great. That's great news. I think
Yeah.
that's terrific. I would love to know about regional, you mentioned this a little bit, but about regional variations in Welsh, and maybe that's accents in different parts of the country, or how does the language change as you move throughout Wales?
So the most obvious divide would be the north-south divide. A lot of the middle of Wales is very sparsely populated, so it's a very mountainous area. So there's that middle section where there's not a lot of people that live there. So the north-south divide is like a real, you can tell where it is. And yeah, they are very different in the pronunciation of words, the kinds of words that they use. And I remember being kind of 12, maybe 10 years old, and I remember going on a camp, and it was the first time that I'd met anybody from the north. And these people were just talking, and I was like, I have no idea what you're saying at all. And it took quite a long time to kind of adjust and learn what they were talking about, basically. And I know one of my friends who I worked with at the Welsh school I taught at, he had such a strong North Welsh accent, and down in Cardiff, some of these kids had never heard this kind of accent before. The kids would just be like, I just don't know what Mr. Williams is saying. I just haven't got a clue. So it can be quite different, but it is something that you kind of get used to, and the more you kind of meet people from the north and the south. Yeah. So they might say, well, they say the word rwan for now, and the South Wales version of now is nawr. So it's rwan and nawr.
Wow.
And you may, if you're very sharp listeners, have spotted that rwan and nawr are spelt back to front. And so the South Wales people like to make jokes about the North people being a bit backward.
Oh.
Yeah. They have a very distinct accent up there. And yeah, across the South Wales then you can see the words changing. So my father's from Pembrokeshire, and so the word for cold in Pembrokeshire they would say where, but we moved then further east, and I grew up saying or, which is quite different.
Yeah.
Where and or. And then when you move even further east, you get oer. So it goes from where to or to oer. And it's just, the same word, just pronounced differently.
How does that happen? I love that.
Yeah, it is fascinating, and you can often tell where, you tell where someone's from just from the words that they use.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. Um, it's funny when you were just pronouncing some of those words, I'm thinking, I've heard Welsh recently, and you know where it was? Gavin and Stacey. It was uh I think was it her Uncle Bryn? Was it her Uncle Bryn? Did you ever
I
watch Gavin and
I
Stacey,
I
first of
did
all?
watch I did watch Gavin and Stacey. Yes, I'm just trying to think when they had the Welsh in it. I mean, they're from they're from Barry, and
Yeah.
Barry's a special place. But
Oh man, I am so embarrassed that that's my reference. Welsh language is Gavin and Stacey. I have a question about where we're seeing Welsh in Wales. And being that there, it's Welsh, it's English. Um, is everything in both languages, like street signs or restaurant menus or bus station advertisements and things like that, or television, etc.? Like, where are we seeing Welsh written?
so we have a Welsh language television channel,
Hmm.
and so that I think was started in early 80s, and it took quite a long time, a lot of fighting to get that. But that's kind of gone from strength to strength really.
Great.
And when I was growing up, I think the quality was questionable, shall we say?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, but now there are a lot of good high quality programs on there, and yeah, the standard is has definitely raised since I was a teenager. We have Welsh language radio
Hmm.
channels, Radio Cymru, which means Radio Wales, not to be
Hmm.
confused with Radio Wales, the English Radio Wales.
Oh no.
Yeah. So if you want to refer to the Welsh one, you have to say Radio Cymru.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are where you might get your media from. In terms of like where you might see it out and about, yes, road signs, any sort of government things have to be in two languages. They have to be bilingual.
Hmm.
There are several stories of disaster translations,
Oh no.
including the one that says something like, in English it says, this road will be closed from 31st of May 20 whatever it is to whenever it is, and then the Welsh translation reads, I'm out of the office at the moment. I will deal with
No.
your query when you get back. And you're just like, how can that even happen? But yeah, it's quite a famous mistake of translating.
Is
Um,
that real or is that like
yeah,
a
no, that's genuine.
wow.
There's a Facebook group called Arwyddion Gwael Cymraeg, which means bad Welsh language signs, and so you see all sorts of amusing and frustrating translations of English into Welsh signs, and they are quite funny, some of them.
Oh man.
Yeah, but yeah, not like if you go to a private business, they don't have to do anything in Welsh.
Okay.
Many often will. Many will do sort of proper translation, get it done professionally, and some will just do a little quick translate on the internet and
Hmm.
hope for the best.
I think my last question about the language is, do we have a Welsh English hybrid sort of lingua franca developing in Wales? Maybe that's used with like younger people or through texting or something, just like has a new language evolved that combines both.
Yes, Wenglish. Yeah,
Wanglish.
yeah. Uh, I think Wenglish is well, it's not a language that is kind of developed as such. It's not a standard thing, but basically, a lot of well, almost, I think by now, 100% of Welsh speakers are also English speakers.
Mm.
They might prefer to speak Welsh than English, but they do understand. So if you're speaking Welsh with someone and you forget the Welsh word for something, just stick the English one in and you'll be absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens, a lot. Even on, I mean, I was going to say even on the radio, it's usually the kind of guests on the radio that do this. The presenters usually have a very high level of Welsh.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, people do often just stick English words in here and there. Some more than others. Some people you can speak to them and you can pretty much get the gist of what they're saying just because there's a lot of English.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's not something that's kind of developed to be used. It's it's a more of a, I want to use the Welsh language, I want to speak Welsh, but maybe I'm not quite so confident, or maybe,
like if you don't know that word or it escapes your mind, you kind of all right. Very cool.
I do have a couple of funny stories of people that mostly speak Welsh.
Mm-hmm.
So, I say funny. No, I'll just do the one funny story. So my friend Rhys was brought up in a completely Welsh household. Went to Welsh chapel, went to Welsh school, lived in the countryside, and didn't really have much contact with English. And we're talking, this is the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. So internet hasn't really hit yet. There's not a great deal of English around, particularly if your parents are quite keen on the Welsh language. And so he was very much, I only speak Welsh and, that's it. And I remember bringing my friend Joey from university to meet him. And Joey's an accomplished linguist. He was brought up trilingually and, has dabbled with a bit of learning Japanese and some other languages. So this guy's as a linguist.
Right.
And Rhys says to him, hello, Joey. How are you today? Slightly siarad Saesneg. And walks off. He just said, I can't speak English. And just walks off. And Joey's there going, what have I done? But yeah, poor Joey.
So how is Rhys these days? Is he?
He's a little bit older now. He's had a bit more life experience, a bit more worldly experience. So he's
Okay. Well, if you're listening, Rhys.
Love you, Rhys.
I read that Wales has one of the oldest unbroken literary traditions in Europe. Do you know if that's true?
I can well believe that it is.
Okay.
I cannot say that I know 100% for sure.
Okay.
But I can well believe that is true.
Okay.
There are records of Welsh poetry going back to the 6th century.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a chap called Taliesin who was a court bard for 2 Brythonic kings. So, back in the 500s, the 6th century, entertainment was hard to come by. So the kings would employ bards, poets, to come and perform poetry for them and entertain them. And Taliesin was one of these famous poets of the time, and his poems were passed down verbally, orally, throughout the generations. And then in the 1300s, 13th century, maybe 12 something, we have records then, written records of some of his poems from way back in the 6th century.
Wow.
So yes, yeah. in the Llyfr Du Caerfyrddin, which means the Black Book of Carmarthen.
Oh, are there many Welsh poets and or storytellers? And I'm asking this question because as I'm thinking all the way back to the 500s and needing poetry for entertainment, I also wonder if oral storytelling became a tradition in the Welsh language and culture, but also I wonder about song and music that has, started centuries ago and maybe is still part of the tradition now. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly poetry that is used and written about and possibly even performed today. Although,
Hmm.
I this is completely random, but when I was at school,
Hmm.
I was completely out of my depth in the top class of the Welsh class.
Hmm.
I was I was decent at Welsh, but I was nowhere near some of the guys that were in this class. And these two guys on the bus in the morning would learn this, and we'll get into this type of poetry called Cynghannedd, and they'd be teaching themselves Cynghannedd. They'd be helping each other out, and now they are both poets.
Huh.
They are both lecturers at a university in Aberystwyth, and they both write poetry. And yeah, one of them was the children's poet for Wales a number of years ago. So there's a post called Children's Poet, and the job of the children's poet is to go around schools encouraging children to write
Oh
poetry.
man, that's
So,
amazing.
yeah, so poetry is certainly still performed. One of the podcasts that I listen to is by one of these guys and his mate, and yeah, it's all about Welsh poetry.
Hmm.
And so they're always going on about, and there's some kind of poetry reading recital going on at this venue and this date, all across South Wales.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's a definitely form of entertainment. As for songs and yeah, I mean, songs not sure about, but
Hmm.
the stories are still passed on. Stories called the Mabinogion, which are mythical stories. Yeah, the Mabinogion, mythical stories about ancient Wales and the history
Hmm.
of our country. It's,
Yeah.
yeah, fascinating stuff.
What are some traditions and pastimes that we enjoy? What do we celebrate? What do we look forward to? What games do we play? What football teams do we support? What are we doing with our lives in South Wales?
Well, we're probably not carving love spoons anymore, uh, although that certainly was a tradition.
Cool.
So a tradition in Wales would be that a man who had an intention for a certain woman would spend his evenings carving a spoon called a love spoon,
Hmm.
and it has all sorts of different symbols that you can carve into the wood, and they mean different things. So you can carve in a church or a bell or a heart or a
Hmm.
something like that, and the man would then give that to the girl that he liked as a kind of intention of, hey, I'd like to marry you. And
Oh.
yeah, so that was a thing for a while, and there is a love spoon shop in Cardiff where I am, and you can go and you can see all the love spoons, and there's people that still make them, but
That's so
it's not
sweet.
quite so widespread as it once was.
Hmm.
We're big rugby fans.
Okay.
This time of year is the time of year for the Six Nations, although at the time of recording, Wales are 0-1 for the tournament, having just got absolutely smashed by Ireland
Oh
on
no.
Saturday. Yeah, I mean it was bad. It was bad.
Sorry.
Yeah, the other thing that we look forward to is the Eisteddfod. Now, the
Eisteddfod.
Eisteddfod is a week-long festival
Mm-hmm.
in the first week of August,
Okay.
which celebrates all aspects of being Welsh. So there are competitions throughout the week.
Mm-hmm.
There are dancing competitions, folk dancing, poetry writing, performing, recitals, that kind of thing, music, all sorts of competitions and performances that go on throughout the entire week. And it's a place where people go to kind of catch up with friends
Mm-hmm.
and meet other Welsh speaking folk.
Yeah.
And there is the big competition, which is the gadair, the chair. So the most prestigious competition is the competition for the chair, and the chair is awarded to the best poem or set of poems, series of poems, written in a specific type of meter called Cynghannedd.
Okay.
Cynghannedd, yeah. So you have just regular poetry writing competition, and you have a Cynghannedd poetry writing competition. The Princeton Encyclopedia of Poetry and Poetics
Mm-hmm.
describe it as the most sophisticated system of sound patterning practiced in any poetry system in the world.
What makes it so sophisticated?
So this is going back again to the early poetry that we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
this kind of 6th century poetry.
Mm-hmm.
They had these rules of consonant matching and rhyming, which you had to have in each line of your poem. And there are 4 different types. And if you want to, we can go into what the 4 are.
Sure.
I've got some examples of some Cynghannedd here.
Okay.
So there are 4 types of Cynghannedd.
Mm-hmm.
There is the Cynghannedd lisg,
Mm-hmm.
the Cynghannedd sain, the Cynghannedd groes, and the Cynghannedd draws. And they all have different patterns of rhyming and consonant matching. So if we find a little example here. Capel garmon garpiog, chwain a ffigau hirion, put o wely bach dilyn, a ffac o ferched bydron. That's an example of an englyn, a poem which has this specific rhyming pattern and specific meter.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Capel garmon garpiog. So the G and the G and the R from garmon and garpiog match with each other.
Okay.
Os daw hi nos da yw hwyneb. So we have the S and the D and the H matching with the S and the D and the H in the second half of the verse. So os daw hi, you got the S, and you can hear the consonants kind of clicking together. Os daw hi nos da yw hwyneb.
Right.
And so there's a whole set. I mean, I've got an entire book here of the rules of Cynghannedd. And yeah, you have to kind of match them all up. It's fascinating stuff.
Really like how Welsh sounds like history. I don't know if it's me, if I'm doing this in my head or if I'm overthinking it, but I feel like I can hear that in the language. And I feel like when you're reading it and when I'm hearing it, I feel so much and I hear so much like history with the language. And I understand why people are so proud of their language and so proud of the culture. I feel like I can hear that. It's coming through just listening to the language, and it's really beautiful. And thank you for sharing those poems, that bit of poetry with us. That's really, wow, that's really amazing. I think I'm super excited because this is my first real contact with, aside from Gavin and Stacy, with the Welsh language and really, getting to understand it from a Welsh speaker, from a Welsh person. So I feel so like grateful, and so like this is a privilege for me, and to be able to talk with you in this time. And
it's a pleasure to be able to share what
yeah,
is a massive part of my identity, who I am, and my culture, and to kind of put it on the map, to get it out there to people to hear is very exciting.
what is, I guess, briefly, in Cardiff, what's life like in Cardiff?
Good in general.
Okay.
It is the capital city of Wales, and so there's much more going on than in a lot of rural Wales. So, if you want to do anything in Wales, you could probably do it in Cardiff,
Mhm.
apart from climbing mountains, because we're quite close to the sea level. Yeah, a lot of people like the nightlife in Cardiff, like going out. Yeah, it's a decent place to live. It's quite a smallish
Mhm.
city, but bigger than I like. I like to be able to walk across the city, whereas it'd probably take me maybe 25 minutes to cycle across the city.
Oh,
So yeah,
that's a nice size.
yeah, it's it's not quite walkable everywhere.
Right.
So it'd take a good 2.5 hours to walk from one side to the other.
Let us know where we can find you, what you're working on. If you want to share any of your social media or any of your, contact information, I'd love for you to do that.
Yeah, sure. The thing that I'm working on at the moment is I have relaunched my podcast. So I've relaunched my Life to the Full podcast. I
Cool.
started it during lockdown and did, I think, 11 episodes. And it kind of, everybody was doing something new in lockdown, and then, you had to get back to work then at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, so now I am starting that up again. So you can find me on podcasts wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's Life to the Full. If you're that interested, I kind of haven't done for a while, some YouTube videos on personal finance. So again, Dafydd Morse, easy to find, and I'm on Instagram, Dafydd Morse, and I mostly post about stuff that I'm up to, which is
Cool.
if people want to get in touch.
Yeah, I'll add links to all of your platforms in the show notes for this episode so that people who want to follow you, who want to get in touch, can do so right away.
Fantastic.
Dafydd, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for talking to me about the Welsh language, the Welsh culture, the beautiful country of Wales.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh man, I feel like I didn't even get to talk to you about as much as I wanted to talk to you about, because I have a lot to learn about Wales, but this is a great start and I'm so fascinated now.
Yeah, well, get in touch again.
Yeah, come back on the show. We'll do this again.
Absolutely.
I like to end each episode with the same question, and I have a feeling this will be a fun one. Do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Welsh to share, to teach us, and mostly to teach me and to teach my listeners?
Well, here we go.
Okay.
Now, I often used to get asked, "Oh, can you say the place name?" So, oh, right, yeah, okay, let's go. And so Wales is home to the longest place name in Europe, and its second longest place name in the world, second only to some place in New Zealand. And It's a little town in North Wales on the island of Anglesey, and there's nothing there apart from a train station and a tourist shop, which has got the big sign of the name of the place. You ready for this?
No, but I got my pencil in hand, so I'm gonna try.
Okay, so the place is called Llanfair Pwll Gwyngyll go ger y chwyrndrobwll Llantysilio go go goch.
Oh, why is it such a long name?
I think it's just so that they could say we are the longest place name. I think it used to be called Llanfair Pwll,
Mm,
and that's how the locals refer to it.
okay.
So, oh yeah, I'm from Llanfair PG maybe. Llanfair
Mm,
Pwll. But yeah,
okay.
Llanfair Pwll Gwyngyll go ger y chwyrndrobwll Llantysilio go go goch is a mouthful.
Does it mean anything?
Yes, it does. It means something along the lines of the Church of St. Mary next to the White Hazel and the Swirling Whirlpool next to the Church of St. Tysilia by the Red Cave.
Very, very, very precise. Very precise. All right. Can we take this syllable by syllable?
Yes, we can.
And I cannot promise I will be able to string this all together, but I want to try every syllable. So I'm
Okay,
ready when you are.
ready.
Yeah.
So we've got llan,
Llan,
yes. Vair,
vair.
so that's Llanfair. Pwll, pwll.
One more time.
Pwll.
Push.
Yeah.
Ah,
Gwyn,
Gwyn.
gill,
Yes.
go,
Gore.
ger,
Ger.
y,
Uh.
chwyrn,
Wow. Wait a minute. Okay. One more time.
chwyrn,
One more time.
chwyrn.
Oh. Wh- wh- Whirn.
Yes, there we go, you got it.
Okay.
Draw,
Draw.
bull,
Bush.
go, ger,
Gor. Ger.
y, chwyrn, dro,
Whirn.
bull,
Whirn. Draw. Bush.
llan,
Fan.
tysilio,
Ticilia.
go, goch.
Gor.
Perfect. And now you just got to piece it all together.
I will work on that. I will work on that. But that was really fun because I didn't know where my my tongue was supposed to go, and I don't know where like how my mouth was supposed to move, and that was thrilling. That was thrilling. That was a lot
And
of fun.
you pretty much nailed it.
I thank you for your kindness and simultaneously apologize to the people of Wales. If anybody has any issues with my pronunciation, but I like to try because that's what language learning is about. It's about trying.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
that was no being 100% serious. That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
That's great.
I won't put you through it again, and I will have to practice that on my own, but thank you for sharing that. And I didn't know that was going to be you know, like such a long word.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
It's one of the things that people do want you to say. Like if you're
Yeah.
from England, Wales, and people find out that you speak Welsh, then
hmm
they will often ask you, "Oh, can you say that really long place name?"
Oh my gosh. I
Yeah,
just imagine you being heckled
it's,
from like across
it's
the
like a little
street.
party trick, you know.
Say the name.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again. And before I let you go, really quickly, I want to ask you. So, if we are in Wales and we've been talking for quite some time, hanging out, let's say we've just left a Shirley Bassey concert,
Yes.
personal favorite of mine, Dame Shirley. Um, we've just left Dame Shirley for the evening. We're going our separate ways. In Wales, in Welsh, what is the best way to say goodbye?
It's just simply hwyl.
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 Yeah, there
Hwyl.
we go.
Dafydd, thank you.
Hwyl.
Thank you so much again. And I'll be talking to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, new episodes of Speaking Tongues are available every Monday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube channel and like and share episodes with other language lovers like ourselves. Ciao!